What if I told you that one of the most heated issues debated in society today is not partisan? It's not a Democrat versus Republican debate or a right versus left, but it's the question of artificial intelligence and the role that it plays in our society and everyday lives. Some people champion AI and others fear that it is a robot takeover of society. So what is artificial intelligence? What can it do? And what should its role be? We begin a deep dive into AI starting today with the question of artificial intelligence in communications and marketing. And we're joined by the Honorable Jeff Coleman, who's the principal of Churchill Strategies, former state representative in the state of Pennsylvania, and the host of Morning Light, a morning show right here on Lighthouse TV. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. One of the most debated topics in society today is artificial intelligence and the use of it, what the impact might be on society. Are there ethical concerns with AI? But a lot of this debate starts with what AI is and what it can do. And so for the next several weeks, we'll be diving into the question of artificial intelligence and its role in various sectors of our society. But before we do that, we need to set some parameters. What specifically are we talking about with AI? And specifically, our focus here, and I think where the debate is in society, is on generative AI. The reality is we use artificial intelligence in all its different forms every single day, from automatic cars to spell check and Microsoft Word. All of these things are forms of artificial intelligence. But the controversy comes with generative artificial intelligence, when the artificial intelligence creates something for its user. And that's where the debate centers. And we begin today talking about where it really all began in the communication space. And there's no one better to talk about that than my good friend, the Honorable Jeff Coleman, former representative in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, author, a communications professional, and of course, the co-host of our morning show here on Lighthouse TV, Morning Light. Jeff, welcome back to Face the Issues, and thank you so much for taking time to join us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Sam. Great to see you.
It's great to see you. And Jeff, let's just jump right in. And again, we said we're talking about generative AI. And not just things like spell check, which, I mean, you are probably a fantastic speller, but I use spell check on a regular basis. And so we use things that are artificially intelligent that help us through everyday life. But in the last several years, I mean, really in the last decade, the government's been watching this, but in the last several years, the public has been introduced to artificial intelligence that can generate, that can create on its own, given certain prompts or certain inputs, and create things for us. And so I want to start with a general question. In the communications, PR, marketing space, what is AI used for?
Well, let me give you a very, very practical example. Today, I opened up my phone and opened up Facebook, and there was a beautiful picture of Vladimir Zelensky and Ronald Reagan having a meeting. And in this meeting, we learned that President Zelensky was paid so much money to have this meeting with Ronald Reagan from USAID money, right? So someone somewhere decided that they were going to have a little fun with people who were concerned about USAID, who were concerned about the issue in Ukraine, and maybe had an affinity for Ronald Reagan, and perhaps weren't paying attention to the fact that he is no longer in the land of the living. And so you combine all those elements together into something that is almost a perfect image of the two men in a setting that looks photographic. Mm-hmm. Now that's one practical example of AI in the hands of someone who's having a little fun and probably creating a little anxiety and confusion, because there are people who are looking at the image right now saying, this is not right. I can't believe our taxpayer monies are used to facilitate meetings between Ukraine and President Reagan.
Yeah, and I think where politically we get this kind of anxiety, companies in America and across the world have figured out that they can do this to help drive products, to help with advertisement, whether it's writing scripts.
Sure.
And we see that with things like ChatGPT, which is the most popular AI form on college campuses today. But also, it's not just scripts, but images, to your point, graphics, and photos. Whether it's people who combine people who are living and people who are passed away, videos, even customer service with chatbots that are increasingly taking over customer service.
Yeah.
We've also heard that businesses say that they use AI to drive their SEOs, their search engine optimizations, and their revenues, and they can use artificial intelligence to parse through data and help predict future trends. Let me ask you it this way: it seems like there's a lot that AI can do. Is it beneficial for companies and communications pros to utilize AI? Or what are the benefits?
Well, it's certainly
of utilizing
beneficial. It's beneficial to somebody who is trying to be more productive, who's trying to push through a lot of information quickly, to be able to analyze data, to look through books for themes, to look through perhaps fraud patterns, and be able to detect whether or not there's something embedded on page 983 of a bank statement. So there's obvious benefits to it. There's huge benefits in the medical field. There's huge benefits for entrepreneurs, people who are inventing products, to be able to for trial and error purposes. But I think where we're having the real challenge this moment is determining what is true and what is false. And that's fundamentally a question that if you're a communications professional who has, by the way, been hired for your expertise, not for your ability to manipulate a program and find an answer, but for you to be able to, what we used to say, think on your feet, to be able to engage in real time. Because we're behind the wall of a screen, it's very difficult, I think, to determine if the person on the screen is really the person on the screen. Let me give you a very quick example. There was a disc jockey in Baltimore. His name is Johnny Dark, who died several years ago. He made some Letterman appearances. And one night I'm on Instagram. Maybe I shouldn't have been wasting my time on Instagram. But Johnny Dark pops up. And it's fascinating because Johnny Dark is singing Christmas carols. And every day he posts a new Christmas carol. And there's really no way, from analyzing just with my own eyes, whether Johnny Dark is still alive and he recorded these videos before he died. But then, so that's the fake part, right? The man singing. But then the comments of people who were reacting to Johnny Dark in the moment to these songs, who have been moved by this, who have maybe a nostalgic connection to this person, that's where the lie begins, right? Because they're not interacting with somebody real. So the question of whether or not a person's name and brand is just a likeness that exists forever. Could a politician, for example, if you want to preserve a politician long beyond their lifespan, could you just put in all the inputs how these people make decisions and then have an AI version of a politician or a bank manager or the president of a Kiwanis club make decisions through AI? That's really the reality of where we're at. It's not just for entertainment and fun purposes. There's real ethical questions here.
Yeah, and Jeff, we're going to get to a lot of that, but one of the questions I want to ask you, right off the bat, is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, in the sense of a lot of companies, a lot of people would say, actually, that'd be great. Like if I could have Jeff Coleman never retire, that would be an incredible thing. And so if I can create an AI with it, why would that be a bad thing? I mean, you're talking about this deception. I think some people would ask you, Jeff, why is that inherently bad? Why would that be wrong?
Well, if you believe that people are made in the image of God and have inherent dignity and value and worth, and part of that worth comes from the work product, the engagement that they have with the person in front of them or their customer, then there is a significant question. I don't know that we've thought through all the answers. You don't have too many, there are very few pastors right now who are preaching on the question of AI. The ethicists are raising the questions when it comes to some of the larger issues. society and culture as it drifts into relying more heavily on AI, as it's replacing, as you mentioned at the very, very beginning, the human workforce with a robot workforce. But this isn't science fiction, and I think right now the technology has outpaced, in the same way that when Steve Jobs introduced this beautiful little glass slab that we slip into our pockets, and it replaced the phone and a lot of other things in our lives, I don't think we've thought through completely the ethics of how that would transform our lives. But it has transformed our habits. It's transformed the way we interact with people, whether we're fully present with somebody. It has certainly changed the way that we drive and just about everything else.
Yeah. Jeff, let me ask you this. A lot of people, obviously we've talked about this argument that AI is beneficial, right? That AI cuts down project time. We talked about boosting productivity. But the other side of that question, does it actually boost productivity, or does it replace human productivity? In the sense of, is there a potential here that we're losing jobs because of AI, generative AI coming in? And I could use the example of the self-checkout, the supermarket, where you used to have 6 checkout clerks, and now you have one that oversees these 6 self-checkouts. And there's concern of, does this happen with speechwriters, with communicators, with graphic designers, where you just, instead of designing, and some people say AI helps boost that creativity, but others say, no, now you just need something that can write a prompt into an AI app to create that creativity. Is there a concern from where you sit as a communications pro that we're not necessarily boosting productivity or creativity, but we're replacing it?
Well, at every stage of the communications journey, I look at people like Thomas Jefferson, or fast forward to a Teddy Roosevelt, or even a general like Dwight Eisenhower, and you look at them and say, how did they accomplish all that they accomplished? President Carter wrote 30 books in his retirement. How did they do this? And it was a combination of the things that they observed during the day, the people who they loved, their experiences in their church. It's all of these experiences that aren't just an algorithm mimicking behavior, but actually responding in a real way to the situations around them, and then being able to give advice. Imagine a father being able to pre-program advice to their children. And there are scenarios where you could think that this might be a good thing if someone is terminal and or someone's in the latter stages of their life, and they want to be able to perpetually give advice to their children based on a value set. You'd think all you would have to do is put all the inputs in. These people read the Bible, they read the Quran, they read whatever their value system is. They implant it, and then perpetually you're able to provide a system of guidance based on this predictive model. I just don't think it works that way. I think that there's a supernatural element to the way that we were designed and created that requires us to be so very present and in the moment. In the same way that we can multitask. Right now I could be texting, if you don't see my hands, and I put them below the screen, I could be texting and doing some other work. I rob you of the ability to have an actual conversation with me. We do that when we're on the phone and we're on the laptop and we're talking and engaging with our children. Instinctually, our children know that, yes, we're being productive, but the larger question is Dad really there? And in some ways, the body is there, but I'm not there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jeff, we're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to pick up right where we are leaving off and really dive into some of the more ethical questions involving AI's use in communication. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. You can view our in-house studio productions on demand, or watch what's on the station right now with our 24/7 live stream. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website, lighthousetv.org, for more information. Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Jeff, when we left off, you're talking about there's a certain human element that even if AI could replace the spoken word or the wisdom and all these inputs, that we still just know that there's a human element and even a supernatural element that's lacking. You gave the example of kids know when their parents, like they might be physically in the room, but then if they're not present, they know that. And it seems like you're suggesting the same thing would be true of AI. And I even wonder, coming off of COVID, with all the Zooming, and I mean, technology is great. We're doing this, via technology, but there's been a lot of mental health issues that came about from just, did we over Zoom? Did we kind of put everybody on virtually? Is that almost a foreshadowing or a warning to the dangers of overusing AI when it comes to even something like marketing and communications?
Yeah, let me be clear. I'm not against replacing the buggy with the Model T or the Model A. I don't want people to think that this conversation is about technology or not technology. The question, though, is when it's the human soul-to-soul interaction that we're looking for. A letter to a letter, when you're writing a grandparent, when you're writing your mom, you can create an automatic response to, dear mom, thank you for your letter. It meant the world to me. And you never read her text or her exchange. We can do that automatically now, but it cheapens the human experience. When nursing homes are looking towards AI to fill in the gap because human beings are not visiting their parents anymore in the nursing home, and they want to be able to provide comfort, especially in areas where there's dementia or memory-assisted units. But they say, well, look at the results. It's so calming to be able to have a robot that they can take care of, and isn't it similar to giving them a baby doll? Because in many cases, that's comforting in the nursing home, or a pet. And I just think that we've got to be very careful that when we're looking to substitute the human connection, which is where the supernatural happens so often, person to person, that we're not replacing it with something completely different. I think that's where we've got to begin the question of saying, where's the ethical line?
Yeah, and Jeff, along to that point, where do you draw the line as a comms pro? We talk about Photoshop and airbrushing. This is not AI. It is to some extent, but you're not creating something new. Celebrities take a photo that gets airbrushed for a magazine. They don't actually look like that. I think most people just kind of acknowledge that, but they wouldn't say that that's crossing a line to what your point is. But I think a lot of people would say, if we're starting to replace family with AI robots in nursing homes, most people aren't comfortable with that. So where do we draw the line? Where should communications pros be okay with AI, and where should their antennas be up?
Well, first, the communications professional has to be able to guard their clients against themselves. If a client knows that they can look like Brad Pitt, but they clearly they don't look like Brad Pitt in real life, but they think this will help me get more social media followers or more engagement, or when I send a direct mail piece with my picture, they'd be more likely to buy my product. The communications professional has to be able to raise those questions of, what are your motives here? When Princess Kate, for example, a few months back, was releasing pictures and they were being analyzed by AI professionals and Photoshop professionals all over the world to say, did she alter her hands, or did she do something with her face to make her look a little better, or her children look happier, or was this a violation of the trust between the public? Or when First Lady Melania Trump released an image of herself right after the inaugural. It was clearly she was not in that time and place. It was an image of her perhaps from a few years ago. But the answer would be, but the public wants to see the First Lady in a certain way. But what are we really doing there? We're saying to people who are older, who have wrinkles, who don't look like a supermodel, that their value is somehow diminished. So you have to continue to find ways to feed your appetite to be something that you're not. I'm not saying that this all ends in an answer, but as a Christian in the communications world, the admonition to look for whatsoever things are true and just and noble, and the challenge to us is to be as truthful in our presentation as possible, and not to represent a fake or a different identity.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. And I guess the follow-up then is that something that, you just talked about as the professionals themselves, right, have a responsibility to guard their clients against themselves. Is there a place here where the government needs to intervene, where there should be laws regulating the use of AI? At some point, does this become false advertising? And again, I think that's probably a different line, right? The law should probably be as minimal as it needs to be. But is there a place where you think down the road the government needs to figure out where we say, no, this becomes false advertising, false words, not protected speech anymore? Or should they just really leave this to the market?
Well, I think the marketplace is demanding, you see this in social media, it's demanding a little clarity. Now, some people might say you're ruining the fantasy or the illusion for me. I wanted to think that these people were still alive or still existed. AI is following the human desire and the trend. So if we miss loved ones, for example, now there's an app that can make your loved one who hasn't been in the world for the last 50 years talk or blink in an old photograph. And for a split second, that little distraction feels good. But I really do think you have to have people who are around you, your friends, your accountability group, people you have coffee with, your relatives, saying, think through what this is really doing. If you can, there was an AI-generated movie on Winston Churchill recently, and they had taken his writings, and then you could hear him speak, and then they were kind of animating it. So you could hear the interview with Winston Churchill that you probably always wanted to hear but was never available. The question is why? Why do I need to, what in me wants me to be able to bring that person alive? And what can I learn from them that I can't learn from writings, from books, from going to their home countries or visiting their houses, going to a museum? I don't know. Those are questions. There's no answers attached. But I think we at least have to have the questions about why am I curious about this? Why did I stop scrolling on that silly picture of the woman who is holding a cake and says, it's my 50th birthday and I have no friends. And then you look at the comments underneath this fake AI-generated image of the woman and her cake, and you're realizing it's just a community of lonely people empathizing with lonely. And so someone on the other end has just enjoyed the game of manipulation. That, to me, has crossed an ethical line.
Yeah. Jeff, last question are we inevitably in the world where AI stays? Is this about we need to figure out when we use it and when we don't, what our ethical lines are, where the law is going to be, but AI is here to stay. Is that your take on this?
I think it's here to stay, and probably in much more sophisticated forms than we're currently seeing. AI gets better every day. Your AI-generated email, text system, whatever AI version that you use, even predictive driving models and all that will get better and better. But it's just like any other tool. It's like a pitchfork or a hacksaw or a hammer or a gun. In the wrong hands with the wrong motives can be very destructive, but in the right hands can be a tool for good. We have to continually be refreshing ourselves with the why, the real reason that I am curious about this, interested in this, want to use this tool. If it's to take shortcuts, to avoid the hard work, maybe you should hit the brakes and say, and rethink why you're engaging the product.
Yeah. That's great advice. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Jeff, thank you for joining us. And our viewers are familiar with you. You've been on the show a lot. You've been with Joe Watkins on State of Independence. Now you host Morning Light, but you also have a career in public service. You've been a state representative, you've been on radio, and you've been a communications consultant, both politically and in corporate worlds for nonprofit. When you look at your career, there's so many different pockets. What makes you do what you do? In other words, what is Jeff Coleman's why when it comes to the things that you do?
Well, I think the why at every season of your life is very different. If I were to look back at the years in politics in my early 20s, my late teens, I'd say that the driving ambition is what drew me to go into politics. And I could say those were ambitions for good things, to do big things. I think that's where a lot of us start. At some point, though, between that point and today, there has to be some maturing, and I hope that maturing has allowed me to at least ask better questions about why I'm doing the things that I do. Today, I mean this with all sincerity, I don't look past the next 24 hours to the best of my ability. I try to stay fully engaged in the minute. I think there is a supernatural element to life that the person in front of you is the most valuable appointment and engagement you can have. I don't always get that right. I look through people, I look past people, I miss opportunities all the time. But I think if you think of life as a series of one-on-one engagements from beginning to end, and those are all divine appointments, and every one of them is loaded with meaning, then that'll first allow you to breathe and not feel so panicked about, well, how does this pay for itself? Don't I have to think about a career? Don't I have to think about what I want to be when I grow up? Fundamentally, the worst question I think you can ask a child is, what do you want to be when you grow up? The better question really is, what do you think you're supposed to do? What kind of a human being? What kind of a man or a woman do you want to be? And how can you love the person in front of you better? What do you have to know about them before you can let your walls down and be a real person? So I guess that's just a roundabout way of answering a question to say I'm still very much a work in progress and learning to do that every day.
Day by day. I love it. Jeff Coleman, thank you so much for joining us and for your insights. And we can't wait to see you on Morning Light coming up.
Sam, I think this is a really important program that you do and a service that you do. Keep it up, and always glad to see you, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you. That is our show for this evening. I want to thank Jeff Coleman for joining us. And again, you can see him every morning on this channel, on Morning Light. And I want to thank each of you for tuning in as well. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.